There comes a moment in your life when you realize that the person you have been is no longer enough for the person you want to become. You may still be living with the same habits, the same fears, the same reactions, and the same patterns that shaped your past. You may tell yourself that you are changing, that you want more, that you are ready for something different. But deep down, you know something is missing. You are still responding to life as the old version of yourself. And this is where real transformation begins. Not when you change your appearance, not when you announce a new goal, not when you promise yourself that tomorrow will be different. It begins when you finally understand that your identity is not a prison. The person you have been is not necessarily the person you have to remain. Maybe you were once afraid to speak your mind. Maybe you spent years trying to make everyone happy. Maybe you accepted disrespect because you were afraid of losing people. Maybe you procrastinated whenever something became difficult. Maybe you constantly needed approval before trusting your own decisions. And after repeating these behaviors long enough, you began calling them your personality. You said, "This is just who I am." That sentence can become one of the most dangerous sentences you ever believe. Because once you turn a behavior into an identity, you stop questioning it. You stop asking whether it can change. You simply accept it. And then your past begins writing the instructions for your future. But your past is evidence of what happened. It is not a permanent definition of who you are. The mistake you made yesterday does not have to become the behavior you repeat tomorrow. The weakness you developed during one period of your life does not have to become your permanent character. The fear that controlled you once does not deserve control over every future decision. You can become someone new, but becoming someone new requires something most people are unwilling to do. You have to stop protecting the identity that is keeping you stuck. Think about how often people defend their own limitations. I've always been like this. I can't stay disciplined. I get attached too easily. I care too much about what people think. I've never been confident. I always ruin good opportunities. These statements may sound like observations, but repeated often enough, they become commands. You begin behaving according to the story you tell yourself. And this is where the psychological trap becomes powerful. If you believe you are someone who always quits, the moment something becomes difficult, quitting feels natural. If you believe you are someone who needs approval, you will constantly look outside yourself before making decisions. If you believe you are weak, you will interpret every challenge as evidence of weakness. If you believe you are incapable of change, you will unconsciously protect the very habits you claim to hate. Your identity begins influencing your behavior, and your behavior begins producing evidence for your identity. It becomes a circle. But the circle can be broken, not through one dramatic decision, through one different decision. The old version of you wants to react, you pause. The old version wants to make an excuse, you take responsibility. The old version wants approval, you trust your judgment. The old version wants to quit, you continue. These moments may seem insignificant. They are not. Every time you behave differently, you create new evidence about yourself. And eventually that evidence begins changing the way you see yourself. This is one of the most important principles of transformation. You do not become someone new by convincing yourself that you are different. You become someone new by giving yourself repeated proof. If you want to become disciplined, stop waiting to feel disciplined. Keep one promise to yourself. If you want confidence, stop trying to feel confident before acting. Make one decision without asking everyone else what they think. If you want emotional control, do not demand that difficult emotions disappear. Learn to create space between what you feel and what you do. If you want respect, stop obsessing over whether people respect you. Start behaving according to standards that make you respect yourself. The shift is subtle, but powerful. You stop asking, "How do I feel?" and you begin asking, "What would the person I am becoming do next?" That question can change your life because your emotions belong to the present moment. Your identity is being constructed over time. There will be days when you feel powerful. There will also be days when you feel uncertain, tired, insecure, and completely unmotivated. If your transformation depends on feeling inspired, it will eventually collapse. Real transformation begins when your behavior becomes stronger than your mood. You do what you decided to do even when the emotional excitement is gone. You keep the promise when nobody is watching. You continue when nobody praises you. You maintain the boundary when someone pressures you to break it. This is where your new identity becomes real, not in public, in private, because there is a difference between performing a new identity and building one. Anyone can announce that they are changing. Anyone can create a new routine for 3 days. Anyone can talk about discipline. Anyone can tell people they are becoming more confident. But when nobody is watching, the truth becomes visible. What do you do when you are alone? What do you do when something becomes uncomfortable? What do you do when you have the opportunity to return to your old habits? These moments reveal who you are actually becoming. And this is why you should stop being obsessed with announcing your transformation. You do not need everyone to know. You do not need to explain every new boundary. You do not need to tell people that you are becoming more focused. You do not need to convince anyone that you have changed. Work quietly. Let the behavior develop. Let consistency become stronger than your words, because there is a psychological danger in announcing your transformation too early. You may begin receiving emotional rewards before doing the difficult work. You tell people about the new person you are becoming. They encourage you, they praise you. For a moment, you feel as if the transformation has already happened. But then the excitement disappears and the work remains. This is why some people become addicted to planning their future instead of building it. They constantly imagine the person they could become, but they rarely practice the behaviors that person would require. Do not fall in love with the fantasy of your future self. Build evidence for that person, one decision at a time. There is another challenge you will face when you begin changing. Other people may resist it, not necessarily because they hate you, sometimes because they have become comfortable with the old version of you. They know how you behave, they know what you tolerate, they know how easily you say yes, they know what makes you insecure, they know how to get your attention, they know the version of you that existed before you started changing. And when that version begins disappearing, they may not know how to interact with you anymore. Someone who was used to your constant availability may become uncomfortable when you protect your time. Someone who benefited from your inability to say no may become angry when you establish boundaries. Someone who is accustomed to controlling your decisions may question you when you become independent. Do not immediately interpret their discomfort as proof that you are wrong. Sometimes people are not reacting to your transformation. They are reacting to the loss of access they once had to the old you, but this does not mean you should become arrogant. Growth requires self-awareness. Listen to criticism. Examine yourself. If someone points out a genuine weakness, have the humility to look at it, but learn to distinguish between useful criticism and pressure to remain familiar. Ask yourself, are they showing me something I need to correct? Or are they simply uncomfortable because I am no longer behaving the way they expect? That question can save you from returning to an identity you have already outgrown. Because one of the greatest temptations during transformation is familiarity. The old life may have been painful, but at least you knew it. The new life is uncertain. You do not know exactly who you will become. You do not know who will stay. You do not know how people will respond. You do not know whether your new decisions will immediately produce results. And the human mind often prefers familiar pain over unfamiliar possibility. This is why people return to old relationships, old environments, old habits, old patterns, not because they are good, because they are familiar, but familiar does not mean safe, and uncomfortable does not mean wrong. Sometimes discomfort is simply the feeling of leaving an old identity behind. You may feel guilty when you first say no. You may feel selfish when you stop over explaining yourself. You may feel lonely when you stop following the crowd. You may feel uncertain when you begin making decisions without approval. Do not immediately run back to your old behavior. You are learning something new. You are teaching yourself that discomfort can be survived. And every time you survive it without returning to the old pattern, you become stronger. This is where transformation begins to escalate. At first, you are simply changing your behavior. then your behavior begins changing your self-image. Your self-image begins changing your standards begin changing your choices begin changing your environment, and eventually your entire life begins organizing itself around the new identity. This is why becoming someone new is more powerful than simply setting new goals. Goals tell you what you want to achieve. Identity determines what you repeatedly do. If your goal is to become disciplined, but your identity remains that of someone who always makes excuses, your goal will eventually lose. If your goal is to become confident, but your identity still depends on constant approval, your confidence will remain fragile. If your goal is to become successful, but your daily behavior belongs to someone who avoids discomfort, success will remain an idea. The deeper transformation is not asking, what do I want? It is asking, who must I become to live differently? That question forces you to confront yourself. Maybe the person you need to become is more patient, maybe more disciplined, maybe more selective, maybe more courageous, maybe less reactive, maybe less dependent on approval, maybe more comfortable with solitude, maybe more willing to disappoint people when necessary. And once you know the qualities you need, begin practicing them. Do not wait for them to appear naturally. Practice them. If you want patience, pause. If you want courage, take the difficult step. If you want discipline, keep the commitment. If you want independence, make decisions. If you want self-respect, enforce your standards. Character is not something you simply discover. It is something you repeatedly practice. And eventually, the practice becomes natural. There will still be setbacks. You will react badly sometimes. You will procrastinate. You will return to an old habit. You will make a decision you later regret. Do not allow one mistake to convince you that transformation was fake. This is another psychological trap. People make one mistake and immediately say, "See, I'm still the same person." No, you are a human being who made an old choice. There is a difference. The question is not whether you ever fall back. The question is how quickly you recognize it and return to the direction you chose. A setback becomes dangerous when you turn it into an identity. I failed becomes I am a failure. I lost control becomes I have no self-control. I made a mistake. Becomes I always destroy everything. Do not make that leap. Describe the behavior honestly. Learn from it. Then choose again. Your future does not require perfection. It requires direction. Every day, you are casting votes for the person you will eventually become. One disciplined decision is a vote. One boundary is a vote. One honest conversation is a vote. One moment of restraint is a vote. 1 hour of focused work is a vote. One decision to walk away from something that keeps weakening you is a vote. You do not need to win every vote. You need to cast enough votes in the same direction. Eventually, the evidence becomes undeniable. You start noticing that you react differently. You think differently. You choose differently. You tolerate different things. You spend your time differently. You no longer need to force yourself to behave like the new person. You have become closer to that person. And this is when something remarkable happens. You stop thinking about transformation. You simply live differently. The boundary that once required courage becomes normal. The discipline that once felt exhausting becomes routine. The independence that once felt lonely becomes freedom. The confidence that once required performance becomes quiet. You no longer need to tell yourself that you are changing. Your life begins proving it. But there is one final thing you must understand. Becoming someone new does not mean destroying everything you were. You are not required to become cold, to become strong. You do not need to become cruel to become powerful. You do not need to stop caring in order to stop people pleasing. You do not need to abandon kindness in order to develop boundaries. The goal is not to erase yourself. The goal is to become more deliberate about yourself. Keep the qualities that make you human. Keep your curiosity, keep your creativity, keep your loyalty when it is deserved, keep your compassion, keep your ability to love, but remove the patterns that make those qualities weaknesses. Kindness without boundaries becomes self-neglect. Loyalty without judgment becomes self-betrayal. Confidence without humility becomes arrogance. Discipline without purpose becomes obsession. Strength without compassion becomes emptiness. The new you should not simply be harder. It should be wiser. You are not building a personality for other people to admire. You are building a life you can respect when nobody is watching. So look honestly at your life. What part of your identity was created by fear? What part was created by rejection? What part was created by your need for approval? What part was created by an environment you have already outgrown? And then ask yourself the most important question: if I stop protecting the old version of myself, who could I become? Do not answer with a fantasy, answer with behavior. What would that person do tomorrow morning? What would that person stop tolerating? What would that person finally begin? What conversation would that person have? What habit would that person refuse to feed? What decision would that person make without asking for permission? Start there. You do not need to become someone new overnight. You need to stop reinforcing someone you have already outgrown. Your identity is being built through your choices. Your future is being shaped through your habits, and the person you become will ultimately be determined by what you repeatedly choose when nobody is watching. So stop waiting for the perfect moment. Stop waiting to feel different. Stop waiting for motivation to arrive. Make one different decision, then another, then another. Let the old identity become weaker through neglect. Let the new identity become stronger through repetition. And one day you will look back and realize something powerful. You did not suddenly become someone new. You became someone new one decision at a time. That is the power of transformation. Not pretending to be someone else, not escaping your past, not creating an image, but consciously building a version of yourself that your old life could not contain. Your past may explain where you came from. It does not get to decide where you go. Your environment may have shaped you. It does not have to control you. Other people may remember who you were. They do not get to define who you become. And your old habits may feel familiar, but familiarity is not destiny. You have another choice, and that choice begins today at Human Psychology Hub. We explore the hidden forces behind human behavior, power, identity, confidence, relationships, and personal transformation. If you want to understand not only how people behave, but how you can consciously change the person you bring into every situation, stay with this channel, because the most powerful transformation is not changing how the world sees you. It is changing what you repeatedly prove to yourself. So if you are ready to stop living according to identity created by your past, subscribe to Human Psychology Hub and start building the person your future requires. There is another level of transformation that most people never reach. They change their habits. They change their routines. They change the people around them. But somewhere beneath all of that, they are still carrying the same internal identity. And eventually, the old identity finds a way back in. This is why you can change your environment and still feel like the same person. You can move to another city and still carry the same insecurity. You can leave a relationship and still carry the same fear of rejection. You can start a new career and still carry the same need for approval. You can build a new routine and still secretly believe that you are not capable of maintaining it, because the deepest transformation does not begin with your circumstances. It begins with the way you interpret yourself. And this is where becoming someone new becomes much more difficult. You have to stop asking your past to give you permission to become your future. Think about how often you use your history as evidence against yourself. You remember the time you failed, the relationship that ended badly, the opportunity you wasted, the person who rejected you, the moment you embarrassed yourself, the years you believe you lost. And without realizing it, you keep reopening these memories as if they are still happening. You are no longer simply remembering the past. You are allowing the past to participate in every decision you make today. You hesitate because of what happened before. You distrust because someone betrayed you before. You avoid opportunities because you failed once. You stay silent because your voice was ignored in the past. You settle because you learned that asking for more might cost you something. This is how the past continues controlling the present. Not because the past has actual power over you, but because you keep using it as evidence for what you believe is possible. And if you want to become someone new, you have to challenge that evidence, not by pretending your past never happened, but by refusing to let one chapter become the entire story. You failed before? That is true. But what happened after the failure? You survived. You learned. You continued. You are here. That is also true. You were rejected. That happened. But rejection does not prove that you are unworthy. It proves that one person, one situation, or one opportunity did not align with you. You made mistakes.
Yes.
But mistakes are not identities, they are events. The moment you understand this distinction, something changes. You stop carrying your past like a sentence. You start carrying it like information, and information can be used. Your failures can teach you where you were careless. Your relationships can reveal where you lacked boundaries. Your insecurity can show you where you depend too heavily on external validation. Your regrets can reveal what you actually value. Your past becomes useful when you stop worshiping it. You do not need to love everything that happened to you. You need to learn from it, because there is a difference between remembering your past and living inside it. One gives you wisdom, the other steals your present. And sometimes the person you need to become requires you to disappoint the version of yourself that was built around survival. This is difficult to understand because many of the habits you now consider weaknesses may have once protected you. People pleasing may have helped you avoid conflict. Silence may have protected you from rejection. Perfectionism may have protected you from criticism. Procrastination may have protected you from the possibility of failing. Emotional distance may have protected you from being hurt. The behavior was not necessarily created because you were weak. Sometimes it was created because you were trying to survive something you did not know how to handle. But protection can become imprisonment. A strategy that helped you once may become destructive when the situation changes. And this is why you cannot simply ask the, why am I like this? Ask a deeper question. What is this behavior trying to protect me from? Maybe you avoid difficult conversations because you fear abandonment. Maybe you constantly seek reassurance because uncertainty feels dangerous. Maybe you control everything because trusting other people once ended badly. Maybe you keep yourself busy because silence forces you to confront emotions you have been avoiding. Understanding the function of a behavior gives you power over it. You stop fighting yourself blindly. You start seeing the pattern. And once you can see the pattern, you can interrupt it. The next time you feel the urge to react, ask what you are actually protecting. The next time you feel the need to seek approval, ask what you fear would happen without it. The next time you want to run from discomfort, ask what you believe discomfort means about you. These questions create distance between you and the automatic version of yourself. And that distance is where freedom begins, because the old version of you operates automatically. The new version begins operating deliberately. That is the difference. The old you says, I feel it, so I must act. The new you says, I feel it, but I can choose. The old you says, they rejected me, so I must be unworthy. The new you says, they rejected me, and I can still respect myself. The old you says, this is uncomfortable, so I should escape. The new you says, this is uncomfortable, so I should understand it before I run. This is emotional maturity, not the absence of emotion. The ability to experience emotion without surrendering your identity to it. And once you develop that ability, people become less capable of controlling you because they can still provoke you, they can still criticize you, they can still disappoint you, but they no longer automatically determine your behavior. You create a space between their behavior and your response, and inside that space is your power. This is why becoming someone new often requires becoming less reactive, not because you should become emotionless, but because reaction keeps you tied to whatever is happening around you. If someone insults you and immediately changes your behavior, they have influence over you. If someone ignores you and immediately changes your self-worth, they have influence over you. If someone praises you and suddenly you feel valuable, they have influence over you. Your goal is not to stop caring. Your goal is to stop allowing every external event to rewrite your internal identity. That is a much deeper form of confidence. Confidence is not walking into every room believing you are better than everyone. It is walking into the room without needing the room to tell you who you are. And that confidence is built privately. It is built every time you keep your word, every time you make a difficult decision, Every time you tolerate temporary discomfort instead of betraying your long-term values. Every time you walk away from something that repeatedly destroys your self-respect, your confidence grows because your brain receives evidence. I can trust myself. That sentence is more powerful than any motivational speech because when you trust yourself, you no longer need constant reassurance. You can make mistakes without collapsing. You can hear criticism without immediately becoming defensive. You can experience rejection without questioning your entire worth. You can stand alone without feeling abandoned. And this is where the transformation becomes internal. You stop trying to become impressive. You start trying to become reliable to yourself. There is a major difference. An impressive person may receive admiration. A reliable person receives something deeper, self-trust. And self-trust changes everything. When you trust yourself, you stop making promises casually. You understand that every broken promise teaches your mind something. If you repeatedly tell yourself you will wake up early and repeatedly ignore your commitment, your mind learns that your own words do not matter. If you tell yourself you will stop returning to a destructive pattern and repeatedly return to it, your mind learns that your boundaries are negotiable. But the opposite is also true. Every kept promise strengthens your internal authority. You say you will do something, you do it. You say you will stop something, you stop. You say you will have the difficult conversation, you have it. You say you will protect your time, you protect it. Slowly, your mind begins believing you. This is how identity changes at the deepest level. You become someone you can trust. And once you trust yourself, you become much harder to manipulate. You no longer need someone else to constantly confirm your worth. You no longer chase people who give you inconsistent attention. You no longer accept every opportunity simply because you're afraid another one will never come. You begin choosing. And there is enormous psychological power in becoming someone who chooses because many people live as if life is something that happens to them. They wait for approval. They wait for opportunity. They wait for motivation. They wait for someone to rescue them. They wait until they feel ready. But the person you are becoming cannot be built through waiting. At some point, you have to act before certainty arrives. You have to make the decision before everyone agrees. You have to move before you know exactly how everything will work. This does not mean acting recklessly. It means accepting that uncertainty is part of transformation. You will never have complete information. You will never know exactly how people will react. You will never know whether every decision will work, but you can know whether the decision is aligned with the person you want to become. That is enough. Ask, does this choice strengthen me or weaken me? Does this habit move me forward or keep me familiar? Does this relationship support the person I am becoming or repeatedly pull me backward? Does this decision come from my values or from my fear? These questions can become an internal compass, and the more you use them, the less you need external direction. But there is something else you must be willing to lose: the old rewards. Every identity comes with rewards, even unhealthy identities. The people pleaser receives temporary approval. The procrastinator receives temporary relief. The victim receives temporary protection from responsibility. The perfectionist receives the illusion of control. The constantly available person receives the feeling of being needed. The insecure person may receive reassurance. When you change, you lose these rewards, and that is why transformation can feel painful. You are not only changing behavior, you are giving up emotional rewards that your old identity depended on. You have to learn to tolerate the absence of those rewards. When you stop people pleasing, some people may become disappointed. When you stop chasing attention, some people may stop giving it. When you stop explaining yourself, some people may misunderstand you. When you stop accepting disrespect, some relationships may become uncomfortable. This is the price of becoming more intentional, and you have to decide whether temporary discomfort is worth long-term self-respect. Because if you always choose immediate comfort, you will repeatedly recreate your old life. The new version of you requires delayed rewards. You may not immediately feel confident, but you become more independent. You may not immediately feel successful, but you become more disciplined. You may not immediately feel powerful, but you become more self-controlled. The results come later, the identity comes first. And this is why patience is not passive. Patience is the ability to continue building when the evidence is still small. You keep going when the transformation is invisible. You continue when nobody notices. You continue when your old identity whispers, nothing has changed. Something has changed. You are practicing. And practice is evidence. There will come a point when your old patterns no longer feel like home. That moment can be strange. The people who once felt familiar may begin feeling distant. The conversations that once entertained you may begin feeling empty. The habits that once gave you comfort may begin feeling destructive. The goals you once chased may no longer impress you. This is not necessarily confusion. Sometimes it is growth. Your internal standards are changing, and when your standards change, your tolerance changes with them. You no longer need to force yourself to walk away from certain things. They simply no longer fit the person you have become. That is one of the clearest signs of transformation. You stop fighting certain temptations because they no longer represent what you want. You stop chasing certain people because attention without respect no longer satisfies you. You stop proving yourself because you no longer need strangers to validate your identity. You stop explaining every decision because you understand that not everyone needs access to your reasoning. You become quieter, not weaker, more deliberate. And this is where the new identity begins becoming visible, not through louder words, through fewer unnecessary reactions, through stronger standards, through more controlled attention, through better decisions, through the ability to walk away without needing revenge, through the ability to remain calm when someone wants to provoke you, through the ability to choose your future over your immediate emotional comfort. This is power, not controlling other people, controlling yourself, because the person who cannot control their impulses will always be controlled by whoever understands those impulses. But when you understand yourself, you become harder to manipulate. You know what triggers you, you know what you fear, you know what you crave, you know where you are vulnerable. And instead of pretending those weaknesses do not exist, you build systems around them. That is wisdom. You do not need to become invulnerable. You need to become aware because awareness gives you options, and options create freedom. So if you truly want to become someone new, stop focusing only on what you want to add to your life. Look at what you need to remove. Which habit repeatedly weakens you? Which relationship constantly pulls you into an old identity? Which environment makes your worst behavior easier? Which belief keeps you playing smaller than you need to? Which fear has been making decisions for you? You do not need to remove everything. Remove what repeatedly contradicts the person you want to become, and then replace it. Do not simply stop scrolling. Replace the time with something meaningful. Do not simply stop seeking approval. Replace it with decisions based on your values. Do not simply stop reacting. Replace reaction with observation. Do not simply stop people pleasing. Replace it with honest boundaries. Transformation becomes sustainable when you replace the old reward with a better one. And eventually the new behavior becomes its own reward. Discipline creates pride. Boundaries create peace. Focus creates progress. Self-control creates confidence. Solitude creates clarity. Responsibility creates strength. The person you become begins rewarding you for becoming them. And that is when transformation becomes self-reinforcing. You no longer need to constantly fight yourself. Your choices begin supporting your identity. Your identity begins supporting your choices, and the cycle reverses. The old cycle weakens you. The new cycle strengthens you. This is the point where you should stop asking, when will I finally become different? Instead, ask, what can I do today that the old version of me would not have done? One thing, not 20. One, have the conversation, keep the promise. Say no. Start the work, end the excuse. Walk away. Stay calm, make the decision, then do it again tomorrow. Because the person you want to become is not waiting somewhere in the future. That person is being built by what you do today. Your future self is not created by imagination. It is created by repetition. And one day, someone may look at you and say, you've changed. You may not even know exactly when it happened. There was no dramatic moment, no announcement, no single decision that transformed everything. There were simply hundreds of small moments when you chose differently. You chose discipline instead of comfort, self-respect instead of approval, courage instead of avoidance, patience instead of reaction, purpose instead of distraction. And those choices accumulated until eventually the person you were trying to become became the person you were. That is the real power of becoming someone new. You do not escape your past. You use it. You do not erase your weaknesses. You understand them. You do not become perfect. You become intentional. And you do not need everyone to recognize the transformation. You only need to recognize it in yourself. Because when you can look at your own behavior and know that you are no longer controlled by the same fears, the same habits, and the same need for approval, something changes permanently. You become your own evidence. And once you become your own evidence, you stop needing permission to evolve. You understand that identity is not something handed to you once. It is something you reinforce every day. So do not ask whether you are capable of becoming someone new. Ask whether you are willing to make the choices that new person would make, because possibility is not the problem. Commitment is. The future version of you already exists as a possibility. But possibility becomes reality only when your behavior begins matching it. So choose carefully. Your next decision may look small, but small decisions repeated long enough can change an entire life. And perhaps the most powerful thing you can do now is stop waiting for the old version of you to disappear. It does not have to disappear. You simply stop feeding it, and as you stop feeding it, something stronger begins to grow, a calmer mind, a stronger character, a more disciplined life, a deeper confidence, a clearer sense of purpose, a person who does not need to constantly prove who they are because their actions already reveal it. That is who you are becoming, not someone completely different. Someone more deliberate, more conscious, more difficult to manipulate, more capable of choosing, more capable of walking away, more capable of staying when something matters, more capable of becoming exactly the person your future requires. And when that person finally emerges, you will understand something your old self could not. You were never trapped. You were practicing, and now you can practice something different. This is Human Psychology Hub. Here we explore the psychology behind identity, power, self-control, human behavior, confidence, relationships, and the hidden forces shaping the decisions you make every day. If you want to understand yourself at a deeper level and build a stronger version of who you are, stay with this channel, because the most important person you will ever learn to understand is yourself. Subscribe to Human Psychology Hub, and remember, your past may have created the first version of you, but your choices are creating the final one.